But just to get started, was it in the Army that you served?
Yes, I first joined the Army in 1948, and I was with the 2nd Infantry Division at Fort Lewis, Washington. And then I got out of the Army, and then they recalled me for the Korean War, and I got in Korea in January of 51.
January of 51. First of all, you say January 51. So from everything I've read and heard about Korea in January, it must have been pretty cold.
Yeah, it was. See, I had, you're familiar with MOSs?
Right, yeah.
Okay. I had a Signal Corps MOS. And when I got to Korea, they assigned me to the 8th Army Signal Company at Busan.
But way down
within
south.
a few weeks, they put me on a train, and I ended up with the 61st Field Artillery Battalion.
Wow.
And that was south of Seoul someplace. I was lucky I didn't get in there earlier when they were way up in North Korea in the Chinese intervention, you know.
Right. Well, I want to ask you about that. So you mentioned that you had been way down in the southeast there in Busan, and then within a few weeks, then you're south of Seoul. So this is the stage of the war then when the North Koreans are being pushed gradually further north then.
Well, we went on the offensive not too long after I got to Korea.
Yeah.
Spring offensive. It was still cold, and we had snow, and we didn't have much for sleeping bags. At first, all we had was just a wool sleeping bag, which wasn't adequate. And we had regular combat boots, you know, which didn't work very well. And later on, they got us these, I think they're called shoe packs, which had the leather bottom and I guess I reversed, the rubber bottom and the upper part was leather.
Yeah.
And that was better, you know.
Wow. What did your job entail? You were with the Signal Corps, but now you're with artillery on a, if there was...
First of all, the first thing they did was they put me on a 50 caliber machine gun, guarding the perimeter. They put us out, there were like 3 of us or so, and they put us out like 100 yards away from the battalion as security, which wasn't really a very safe thing to do, you know, because we were all out there by ourselves, way away from everybody. I remember one time we were set up on an old railroad track. But then later on, they put me on a forward observer team.
Oh, boy.
And I was a radio operator. And the radio, it weighed like 40 pounds. It was SCR 619 radio.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if you're familiar with that, the forward observer team, you had a lieutenant, a reconnaissance sergeant, a radio operator, and usually one other person. We had a Korean with us. His name was Yobo, we called him, and he helped carry the radio.
Wow.
He was a good friend of mine. He was just a very talented individual. He could speak Japanese and Chinese and Korean and English, and I always wondered what happened to him. But
wow. Now I know I've talked to a lot of Vietnam vets who say that forward observers were, and radio, you know, folks who are on the radio, that they were, I mean, everybody of course is a target, but they were especially targets. Did you feel that in your service, that being on the radio made you even more of a target than others?
Yeah, we went right with the infantry, so we tried not to get in a conspicuous place, you know, when we set up, you know, and you know, we'd observe targets, and if we saw something, you know, we had a M2 compass. Maybe you've seen those.
Yeah.
I have lots of Korean War paraphernalia, you know.
Is it stuff you brought home with you, or stuff you...
No, this stuff I acquired later on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can show you my stuff I have. This right here, this is a 619 radio like you without the battery.
Yeah.
And you probably heard of SCR 300.
Let me see if you're saying
This was a conventional infantry radio.
Okay. And so these are the kind of radios you used in Korea.
Yeah, basically everything was the same as World War II. But this battery, or this radio was around in the neighborhood of 40-some pounds. We put it on a pack board so it would be easier to carry.
Wow.
And this is the M2 Compass. I got more than one of these. This is in Mills. This is what we would sight to get the azimuth of a target.
Wow.
We'd call in, we'd say fire mission, and we would give the map coordinates. Of course, the problem was that the maps that we had were Japanese maps. And once I got mixed up, see what happened later on in the war, that I was with my lieutenant and we were talking on the reverse side of a hill, and we were watching these mortar rounds. You could see them when they'd go way up, and then you lose sight when they start coming. They were firing us. I think they were like 81 millimeter or something like that, maybe. But all of a sudden, one landed right behind us, and he got wounded. I don't know how severely, but and then I became the forward observer, and that, just shortly after that, they made me sergeant, a reconnaissance sergeant then.
Wow.
But I got my coordinates mixed up once. I saw the Chinese out in front of us, and I asked for a round of white phosphorus, and looking for the smoke from it, and there's no smoke, and somebody's pointed behind me, and I got kidded about that a long time. They call me Short Round Charlie. But but what we'd do, we'd fire a round of white phosphorus, and then you'd adjust from that, and then we'd fire, like, you heard of VT fuse?
No, I haven't heard of that.
A VT fuse, that was like, I got an artillery shell here someplace. This is a 105 shell.
Yeah.
And this is where the VT fuse was. And what that was a little radio transmitter.
Yeah.
That activated where the shell was fired, and it would send out a radio signal. And when the signal would bounce back by, like, from 30 yards away, it would set off the shell.
Really?
And so burst, you get an air burst, and it would just tear people to pieces.
Yeah.
VT stood for variable time, but that was something they started in World War II, and they were kind of careful about using it because they didn't want any duds to be found. So I think the Navy was the only one that used it for quite a while in World War II.
I see. Until they were more reliable.
Now you could get air bursts from that, and you could kill a lot more people that way. But
wow. Now you said that
this is basically what this dummy that I have back here. This is basically what we wore. We had an N1 carbine like this. Only it was the M2. Our carbine was fully automatic. It could be semi or fully automatic. Fully automatic, you would fire like 750 rounds a minute. You had 30 round clips that you used with it. I got some of those for someplace, but yeah. Here's a 30 round clip, and we'd clip these. We'd have these hooked together end to end, so that when you fired one, then you just flip it around and stick the other one in.
Wow. Wow. So, and how long would it take to go through a couple clips?
Well, you didn't hold the trigger very long. Usually we just use a semi-automatic. Your ammunition was gone. But that was a kind of a small round. A carbine round was pretty small.
Yeah.
Like these are M1 carbine rounds.
Wow. Wow.
These are clips like for an M1 rifle. This was this rifle weighed about 9 pounds or so.
Wow.
And this was a clip And when you'd fire this, of course, you'd insert the clip. And, you know, people always said that one bad feature that was when you fired your last round, the empty clip would fly out and make a ping sound. Of course, if the enemy was near you, they would know that you were out of ammunition.
Yeah, wow.
People used to talk about getting an M1 thumb, that when you went to let the bolt go forward, you had to take your thumb out. Otherwise
it'd get clipped there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So these people have an M1 thumb.
That's quite a collection you have there. I mean,
Pardon?
it's quite a collection you've got there.
Yeah.
Pretty
This is
amazing.
I tried to duplicate, you know, the uniform that we wore. We had binoculars.
Yeah.
And we compasses.
Now you said that
hand grenades like this, and I always wondered how foolish we were to, because if that pin came out, you had 5 seconds, you know.
Wow. How much, I mean, I'm sure it would vary, but you said that one of the radios weighed 40 pounds. You said that the M1 weighs 9. Each of the grenades, I'm guessing 2 or 3 each. I mean, how much weight might you be carrying on a given day?
Okay, you had your canteen.
Right.
You had poncho, food. It was a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Maybe 80, 90 pounds, maybe?
Pardon?
Maybe 80 or 90 pounds you might be carrying?
I suppose you could, you know, I don't think it would be that much, but we alternated carrying the radio.
Okay. Oh, okay,
you know,
yeah.
Some of the time, and
yeah. Now, one of the things that I'm reading about in a memoir I'm almost done with now, and I've read about it in other things in the Korean War, are these sort of wave attacks where, especially the Chinese, or at least I'm reading about the Chinese, how the Chinese would just launch these wave attacks, just wave after wave after wave. Does that fit with your experience?
I was fortunate because not too long before I got in, our battery was overrun, you know. But by the time I was in, you know, I was fortunate because we weren't overrun by the Chinese. We got surrounded once, but I think there's one photograph that in there that shows a tank with it in a river.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was the Injim River, and they had a pontoon bridge across that river, but the heavy rains washed it out, and then they took sections of the pontoon and had motorboats that would carry vehicles back and forth. And the tank would get up near the shore, while then they'd back up a little bit to raise the front of the pontoon up, and he backed up too far.
Yeah. Now
they drug the tank out afterwards, but we had all M4 tanks, M4A3 tanks mainly.
Yeah. There are a number, I'm looking here at your photo album, and there are a number of photos of wounded Chinese. How would you describe the Chinese as an enemy? I mean, were they, I can't think of a good way to put it, but I mean, were they a serious adversary, the Chinese? Just in terms of their tactics, their ability, etc.?
Yeah. They didn't have the weaponry really that we had, you know, and they didn't have air support. Yeah. But again, I was kind of fortunate because I didn't get involved with, you know, the human wave attacks or anything like that with them.
Yeah.
But
you must have gotten pretty close. I mean, could you just tell me, like, I'm looking at a number of photos here I'm looking at some photos here of wounded Chinese. If you have one of those photos in your mind, can you remember a story behind, or just what is the background to, you know, the photos of wounded Chinese?
That was, we were on we'd been stationed on some hill for some time, and we had fired on these Chinese that were down in a valley down below us, you know, somewhat sort of a plains like, and that was the aftermath when we went down there.
Yeah.
Uh, I took a few. I took a lot more pictures, but I gave several rolls to a friend to take back, and I never got them back from him. So,
Mhm.
but
Wow.
I know once it was in that area where that bridge was. I remember the Chinese were attacking our tanks, and our tanks were shooting them off each other. And I remember there were piles of dead, just heaped up several. There were like mounds of dead people all over the place.
Wow.
But
Mount of dead Chinese or both
yeah,
sides?
dead Chinese. Yeah.
When you were in Korea, of course, we Americans think of the Korean War as an American war, but of course it was actually a United Nations war. Did you have any interaction with other United Nations forces, or were you only with Americans?
Yeah, we were around the French and British and Turks. Turks like to collect ears.
Oh,
I had one guy, one of my friends is kind of weird. He was collecting gold teeth from, he had a little jar full of gold teeth. He was going to make tie tacks or cufflinks with them. I don't know.
wow.
He was kind of weird.
This
But
was an American
the
guy, or
problem, sometimes you'd be in a place, where units would always put out booby traps and stuff like that, and then they'd leave, and you wouldn't know. Like, we were in one area where the Greeks had pulled out of, and they had left uh, booby traps around and stuff.
that
And
the
I sort
Greeks?
of encountered one. I hit a tripwire, and I thought it was a hand grenade tied to a tree, because they would take hand grenades and bend up the handle and have the pin straightened out. But instead, it was a thermite grenade, which just burns. It
Wow.
doesn't. But thermite grenades, they were used if you had to destroy equipment. You'd throw, if you had to just
I
leave
see.
a Jeep behind you, put a thermite
Yeah.
grenade in the engine, melt right down in the engine and destroy it.
But this was a trap set by another Allied force.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The booby traps are kind of bad, because a lot of times between rice paddies, you only have one place to walk, and anti-personnel mines a lot of times were put on those places between the rice paddies, and stuff. So
Wow. When you were there, did you have much interaction with local Koreans?
not too much. I know one occasion. I know we were in one area, and we were back in reserve, and they sent us out, and there were like maybe half a dozen Korean homes or something like that in a cluster, and they said, get those Koreans out of there. And we went in there, and here there are a bunch of old men and old women sitting around charcoal burners and stuff, and we just couldn't do that. We just left them there. But we
Yeah.
probably would have got caught not chasing them out, but it was winter.
Oh, wow. Yeah. How long were you in Korea altogether?
I think I got in there in January. See, if you're with the front lines, you got 4 points a month. So you had to have 36 points to get out. If you're way back, you got 1 point a month, and it's
Wow.
going on a scale, like that. So I was lucky I could get out in 9 months then.
Wow. And of those 9 months, how much of those 9 months would you say you were in, either that you were basically in a combat zone? Not that fighting is going on continuously, but there's the possibility of it. Of that 9 months, how much of that time are you actually in a combat zone?
7 months, I would say.
I'm sorry, 7 or 8?
We only held back in reserve. I never saw a USO or anything like that.
Wow. So pretty
The
much,
rest irritate me. When I left Korea, I left Incheon and on an LST, and then we went on a ship called the General Balu and we went to Sasebo, Japan,
mm,
and we got there, and these Red Cross people were giving out donuts and in coffee. We all rushed up there and said, no, you guys got to wait. We get the regular people that are staged there. We got to feed them first, you know. So
Wow.
we all just that ended me with the Red Cross, you know, because of them.
They had no idea. So your 9 months in Korea was a very full 9 months. Not many breaks in there. Wow.
We'd go back in reserve once in a while, but of course, we went back in reserve. You got caught not wearing your helmet. You had to pay $5, you know, and stuff like that.
I'm looking at your photo album here, and I'm seeing Safeconduct passes. This one says issued by the Korean People's Army, the Chinese People's Volunteer Forces, and basically encouraging you to surrender, telling you that you'll be taken care of, etc. How did these, are these things you just found on the ground, or how did you get these things?
They would leave them behind usually when they would retreat. They just leave scatter around and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And we did this. I think sometimes we dropped by airplanes maybe and stuff like that.
Right.
But
similar leaflets. Yeah. When we look back on the Korean War now, it seems like a victory. Have you been back to South Korea since the war?
No, I haven't.
So I was in South Korea, I guess about a year and a half ago. And unlike when you were there, I mean, now it's a thriving, prosperous democracy. And so from the point of view of 2020, the Korean War looks like a clear victory, at least for South Korea. The North is obviously a different story. At the time in 1953, when the armistice went into effect and the combat stopped, did it feel like a victory to you? I know at the time some people weren't very happy about how that thing ended. What was your own feeling about that?
I guess I was glad it was over, but I think the thing was that people didn't appreciate anything. I mean, no one, there were no greetings or anything like that. I always remember when we got back to San Francisco, we sailed on the Golden Gate Bridge, you know, and we saw on this dock, here's a band playing, and we thought, wow, you know, we're on a ship called Aiken Victory. And it was, and all of a sudden the ship stopped, and then we are pushed away from the dock, and they go up to Pittsburgh, California. We stayed on the ship another night, and we got off, and there was nobody, you know.
Yeah. Korea is kind of that. I mean, do you agree when people call it the forgotten war? You know, kind of coming.
Yeah, because no one acknowledged, because it was called a police action. It wasn't a war.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you been to the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C.?
Yes, a couple times. I went on the honor flight, was it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've seen that.
Yeah, Korean War, that's the way it was, you know, that's a good, faithful reenactment, you know, showing the guys with the equipment. They had the radios, the BARs and the rifles and everything like that. And,
Ponchos.
you know, yeah, the ponchos. I've got one of my dummies. I got a poncho in my other war room, you know, and stuff, you know.
Yeah, yeah, wow. Do you feel like in the past several years there's been more interest among people in hearing about your experiences in Korea?
I think so. I think so. You know, when we went on that honor flight, my daughter was there when we left, when we came back, and the whole family, they had about a dozen different big posters, you know, and the band was playing. There was fireworks, and they had the hangar. We got all kinds of food, and it was a huge welcome. It really made you feel good, you know.
Yeah.
But it made me feel bad. You know, there were World War II veterans, and there was, I remember there were 2 or 3 of them that were supposed to go on the trip that died before the trip took place, you know. So,
yeah.
In fact, I had a brother that was killed in the Second World War. He was killed near he was buried in Epinal, France. We did go where he had been buried. We had his body brought back, but we went to see the cemetery where he had originally been buried, you know, and where he had fought and stuff like that.
Wow.
But
What,
he was
what,
with the 191st Tank Battalion.
what was your brother's name?
Donald.
Donald. What impact do you think that affected you anyway when you were in combat yourself, knowing that your brother had been lost in the Second World
Didn't
War?
really think about it, but I don't think a day goes by when I don't think about him though, because yeah, I had 4 brothers in the Second World War, but he was my favorite brother. He was everything to me, you know, and he was a great person. He was killed in Epinal, France. In fact, it was kind of strange that this was a picture of his grave in France, that somebody had a family member that was killed and buried near him, and they took a picture of the guy took a picture of his brother's grave, and my brother's grave happened to be in the same photo, and this woman got a hold of us and she sent us a picture of the grave.
Wow.
You know.
Wow, yeah. Yeah. Now,
but here's a picture of him, a better picture of him.
oh,
you
yeah,
know.
let's see. Oh, wow. How old was he?
He was 27.
How long did you stay in the Army yourself? When did you went in 48, got out, went back in, and then when did you finally get out again?
And when I came home, I was enlisted reserve, so I terminated my Army service. I was still in the reserve, but I was through with active duty then when I got home in October of 51.
How did that adjustment go for you, going from the world of war back into normal American life?
It was kind of different. I mean, my girlfriend, who I married later, thought I was a different person. You know,
yeah, she said she almost didn't marry him because it was such a difference between when he left and when he came back.
Yeah.
And then they had 8 of us. So
yeah,
things went well and they're still married.
Wow. Well, Mr. Allen, what do you think people should know about the Korean War? It is true that, you know, we hear a lot about World War II, we hear a lot about Vietnam, and then Korea is kind of there stuck in the middle. I can say, you know, based on things that I just know from what I've read and heard, but also from this trip I took to South Korea about a year and a half ago. You know, I still think there's a high degree of gratitude in South Korea for what the Allied forces did, the United States being the key Allied force. I think there's still a lot of gratitude in South Korea for what you guys were able to do. But what do you think young people today should know about the conflict in Korea?
I don't know. I just like them to know that, you know, the people, you know, they suffered a lot. And they suffer from the cold and you know, just generally worrying about stuff. You know, you're just scared so much of the time, but it's good to know the Korean people appreciate that sort of, because you know they did send a commemorative book out to everybody.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And I got a copy of that.
You said a few minutes ago that not many days go by that you don't think about your brother who was lost in the Second World War in France. How about you and your 9 months in Korea? Would you say that that's something that in one way or another is with you every day as well?
Yeah, I still think about it. I miss a lot of the guys I was with and stuff. And, you know, the sad thing is that in today's world, you could have located these people and kept up with them. But, you know, all my friends and stuff, you know, I think about some of the people that I was with and stuff like that. But, you know, but there's no way I can communicate with them. And now they're all gone. So.
Yeah. Is there, as you know, these thoughts go through your head, is there a particular memory that really kind of stands out in your mind when you think back on those 9 months in Korea?
I don't know any particular one.
You've told us the foxhole story when you were
Yeah, I always tell the kids at times that you're being cold and wet. I think that's one of the things that really stood out. That I remember once we were in a foxhole and we were with the infantry. See, the thing that always kind of bothered me was that not getting the infantry combat medal. They talk about it, combat artilleryman's badge, but we were with the infantry all the time, but we didn't get the infantry battle. But like the one time in the foxhole, we just poncho raged over the top of it, and it filled up with water, and all of a sudden we were just soaked. It was cold, and you just like to get any place where it was dry. I think that's one of my most vivid memories, being cold and wet and hungry. Because once I know that we were without food and it was pouring down rain, and all I had was a can of corned beef hash.
Oh, wow.
And I hate corned beef hash.
he still won't eat it.
And
Ever since.
And then the rain had washed away some bodies of probably Chinese, I suppose. They were in shallow graves, and the stench of that I lost to the corned beef hash.
Oh,
and
gosh.
I've never eaten corned beef hash since.
Sometimes veterans will say that, Vietnam veterans will often say if they hear a helicopter, that's something that will just bring them right back. Or if a certain smell will bring them right back. The other day I spoke with a Persian Gulf veteran with a Desert Storm veteran who said that a certain smell would bring him back to his experience. Is there anything like that for you? Any certain smells or sounds or sights that kind of will just bring you right back to Korea?
Not that I really recall, but
No.
I do remember my brother had been in combat engineers. I remember once I set off firecrackers. Oh, he jumped.
Oh, yeah. But they don't have that kind of effect on you, fireworks or anything?
No, it didn't, no.
Yeah.
I can't think of any special smells. I guess if I smell dead bodies, that would be something, but I haven't smelled any dead bodies lately.
Yeah, that's not common where we are.
But I remember the smell of that and stuff, so.
Yeah. Well, Charles Allen, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's good to have a copy of this photo album, and you've got copies of some of your photos, and it's good to have those. It'll be good to use those in a class I'm teaching.
I appreciate having people like you that are doing this sort of thing, that because so many people don't know history. You talk about the Korean War, so many people have no idea what it was,
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share some of these memories with us. It looks like you've got a pretty amazing collection there. My office looks like
Wisconsin, come visit me.
What's that?
If you ever come to Wisconsin, come visit me.
Well, I'd like to see that museum you have there. It looks
yeah, this is only the first room. He's got a whole nother room.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
It looks impressive. Well, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. What's that?
Thank you very much for what you do. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir.